Welcome to the futurist public intellectual. It's now been 4 months since the controversy over Dylan Mulvaney's paid promotion by Anheuser-Busch began. On April 1st, 2023, the media personality uploaded a video onto Instagram promoting Bud Light. The beer brand produced a special beer can with Mulvaney's likeness on it for March Madness and gave it to her. This immediately ignited a firestorm of conservative backlash and galvanized a boycott of Bud Light. Bud Light experienced a sales drop of around 25% for every month since this controversy began. Anheuser-Busch laid off almost 400 employees last week, which, of course, can be attributed to these boycott-related sales drops. Even though Bud Light has been the #1 beer brand in the U.S. for the past 2 decades, Modelo Especial eclipsed Bud Light for the first time in the 21st century in May 2023. This fiasco is absolutely fascinating because it was so foreseeable and preventable. Doesn't Anheuser-Busch know through decades of consumer data that many of their customers are conservative? If anything, it should be obvious that a coastal liberal is more likely to buy a craft beer than Bud Light. The fact that this sponsorship with Mulvaney was greenlit goes to show how much the woke agenda has contaminated the business world, but also how much corporations feel like they need to engage in pinkwashing. While Bud Light deserves the backlash for its misguided pinkwashing and not standing by its spokesperson during these trying times, the more important issue is Dylan Mulvaney herself. There's a lot of understandable confusion around gender these days, and Mulvaney seems to be taking advantage of the porous border between non-binary and transgender. Non-binary means that a person does not identify fully with masculinity or femininity, meaning it can be a total rejection of them or some amalgam of both. Transgender means that a person does not identify with their biological sex and wishes to be the opposite sex. Based on these definitions, one can see why it's transgender people who get gender reassignment surgeries due to their gender dysphoria about their bodies, while non-binary people are primarily concerned with their gender presentation and performance. Even though Mulvaney calls herself trans, the evidence points to her actually being non-binary. Her infamous video in which she sings about normalizing the bulge indicates that Mulvaney doesn't actually experience gender dysphoria. Trans people's discomfort with their misgendered physiological traits is the root of gender dysphoria. One would expect Mulvaney to express anxiety about her bulge, but she doesn't. Another reason to be skeptical about Mulvaney's trans identity is that it's been over a year since she started her Days of Girlhood TikTok series, and she has yet to get a penectomy, the removal of the penis, an orchiectomy, the removal of the testicles, or a vaginoplasty, the construction of a vagina. With an estimated net worth of $1.5 million, Mulvaney does not have a financial obstacle to getting these surgeries, considering they average around $30,000. In fact, the only surgery Mulvaney has gotten so far is a facial feminization surgery, which is a surgery that's much lower in priority for trans people than the aforementioned ones. Again, the unnecessary delay in getting these more extreme surgeries points to a lack of gender dysphoria and the existence of a non-binary gender identity. It's important to examine whether Dylan Mulvaney is authentically a trans person, not because I have a right or the ability to assess the subjective reality of Mulvaney's psychological state. We have to examine the authenticity because if Mulvaney is a fraud, then she does not deserve the fame and fortune that have come her way. It's important for society to have role models who are genuinely good people, regardless of whether it's a liberal or conservative definition of goodness. Her series is allegedly a daily documentary of transitioning, but she's not really transitioning. Since it's obvious in August 2023, after over 500 days of this charade, that Mulvaney isn't truly a trans person who genuinely experiences a gender dysphoria that she could treat by simply having a few surgeries. It's ruthless to exploit people's confusion of non-binary and transgender identities for monetary gain. If Bud Light wants to support Mulvaney as a non-binary person, then sure. But Mulvaney's sponsorship has nothing to do with trans people. This is what makes Mulvaney a bad role model. In the end, Dylan Mulvaney and Bud Light are right for each other. Mulvaney is using Bud Light for money, while Bud Light is using Mulvaney for brownie points with the woke crowd. We, the public, should not be supporting such disingenuity. Thank you for listening to the Futurist Public Intellectual.